Hey everyone, welcome back, and thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share, so let's get started. I've been madly in love with my wife, Judy, for 20 years, ever since the night I met her at a college graduation party. We had never met before that night, even though we both attended the same college for 4 years. What impressed me most that evening was Judy's knowledge of expensive Scotch whiskey. She brought a bottle to the party, and we all enjoyed it as we sang along to Beatles songs, especially when I'm 64, in a semi-drunken stupor. Judy's father owned a high-end liquor store, and she worked there. We spent the next hour talking about whiskey and bourbon. She invited me to a whiskey tasting event at the store that weekend, and we've been together ever since. She still works there as the office manager. As for me, I sell carpeting. It's not the most exciting job, but with my wife's paycheck, we manage to pay the bills. Judy and I both love the Beatles song, When I'm 64, which the DJ played at our wedding for our first dance. We have 3 children, Vera, Chuck, and Dave, all named after characters from our favorite Beatles songs. When Judy was pregnant again, this time with a girl, we couldn't decide between the names Lucy or Rita, also inspired by Beatles songs. Sadly, Judy suffered a miscarriage, and she never fully recovered from the loss. No matter what I said or did, I couldn't find a way to comfort her. She blamed me for the loss, saying it was because I had been so insistent on having a 4th child. Looking back, I think that was the beginning of the end for our marriage. She no longer wanted intimacy with me or even to hug me. I hoped that she just needed more time to recover from the miscarriage, and that I had to be patient with her. For my 40th birthday last year, my father-in-law gave me a $600, 25-year-old bottle of Glenlivet Scotch. I hadn't opened it yet. I was saving it for a special occasion. My wife gave me a gym membership, telling me I needed to lose the beer belly and take better care of myself. She also suggested I get hair plugs to fix my receding hairline. She wasn't being subtle. She works out at a gym twice a week and weighs the same as she did the day I met her. I admit, I've let myself go a bit. I can find the time to work, but I don't have the energy for both work and working out. A month later, I had a tough day at work. I was undercut on price and lost a large commercial sale I'd spent the past 2 weeks working on. I came home hoping to find some comfort by finally sampling that bottle of Scotch. I opened the liquor cabinet and noticed the bottle of Scotch had been opened, with about 4 shots missing. I was furious. I had 3 teenage children, and I needed to know which one had broken the rules by drinking alcohol, especially from this expensive bottle. I immediately knew that each of my kids would point fingers at the others, and I would never find out the truth. So I decided to take action. I bought and installed a motion sensor camera on the bookshelf opposite the liquor cabinet. Once I knew who had taken the Scotch, there would be consequences. Losing car privileges for at least a month would be just the beginning. I'm not a strict disciplinarian, but I do set firm limits on important issues like underage drinking or drug use. Frankly, I was surprised one of my kids would test me like this. It was uncharacteristic, as they were generally good kids. But I suppose teenagers sometimes rebel to see how far they can push the boundaries of what their parents will tolerate. 3 days later, I saw that even more Scotch was missing. I removed the memory card from the hidden camera and placed it in my computer. What I discovered shocked me. Instead of finding footage of one of my kids, I was astounded and furious to see video of my half-naked wife with a completely naked man, as he poured himself and my wife some of my Scotch. He wasn't younger than I was, and he wasn't in better shape, so I didn't understand why she was being intimate with him. However, when I saw him, I quickly realized what she saw in him. I have never cheated on my wife, and I would have never believed that my wife of 20 years would cheat on me if I hadn't seen the undeniable evidence. I knew that if I didn't leave the house immediately to cool off, I might do something that would land both of us in serious trouble. When she came home, I grabbed my bicycle and rode for a couple of hours to calm down. For me, 2 hours of biking does more to relieve stress than 2 hours of drinking. Plus, I don't wake up with a hangover The irony of it all is that because my wife works at a liquor store, I could buy all the alcohol I wanted at a huge discount. I wish she worked at a bicycle store instead. I knew I was going to divorce my wife, but I needed revenge on the man who had broken up my marriage, someone who thought he could take my wife and my booze. He had destroyed my life, and I was determined to make sure he paid for it. You could call me vindictive, and you'd be right. But my wife was safe because she was the mother of my children, and I could never bring myself to harm her. I needed a plan. It wasn't a well-thought-out scheme. It was more of an inspiration. I bought another motion sensor camera, but this one was Wi-Fi enabled. When triggered, it would send me a live video on my iPhone. There were a couple of semi-shady ex-convicts who worked on the loading dock at my company. I purchased $200 worth of Rohypnol from one of them, then paid him another $200 to forget the transaction ever happened. That night, I came home to find more of my scotch missing. This wasn't a one-time betrayal. This was a long-term affair. I felt a wave of anger and mixed emotions. I decided to take action. I warmed up a tumbler of scotch so the drug would dissolve completely and added several Rohypnol tablets. Then I poured everything back into the bottle of scotch. I knew this man came to my house about 3 times a week, usually around noon. I was prepared. I bought an identical bottle of scotch, emptied a little from it, and hid the pristine bottle in a cabinet near the liquor cabinet. 2 days later, while I was at work, my iPhone buzzed with a notification. Scotch party time once again. I was disgusted when I saw him licking scotch off her body. I knew Rohypnol took about 30 minutes to take effect, which was the exact amount of time I needed to drive home from work. I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and left early. This excuse wasn't just for my boss. It was part of the plan to satisfy the police if they ever questioned me. When I arrived home, I parked in the driveway and quietly entered through the back door. There they were, my wife and her lover, sound asleep on the living room floor. His clothes were scattered all over the place. I calmly placed a few Rohypnol pills in the pocket of his pants to make it seem like he had been using drugs. Then, I replaced the drugged scotch bottle with a fresh, untouched one I had brought with me. I collected the hidden cameras I had installed earlier and took them out to my car. Next, I went upstairs and changed the sheets on our bed, replacing them with clean ones. I also brought down some clothes for my wife, who was lying naked downstairs. After dressing her, I carried her to the car along with the dirty sheets, the hidden cameras, the tampered scotch bottle, and the glasses they had used. I drove 5 minutes away to my sister's house, where she was waiting. We exchanged cars, and my sister drove my unconscious wife to our beach house in Mexico, about 2 hours away. Meanwhile, I returned home to finish the final part of my plan. Back at the house, I broke a small window pane near the front door to make it look like someone had forced their way inside. My wife's lover was still lying unconscious on the floor, completely unaware of what was happening. I called 911 and reported in a panicked voice that a crazy naked man had broken into my house and attacked me. To make it convincing, I punched him hard in the nose, kicked him twice between the legs, and stomped on the fingers of his right hand for good measure. A few minutes later, the police arrived. I went outside to meet them and explained what had happened. I told them I had come home to find a naked man in my house, that he had attacked me, and that I fought back in self-defense. I showed them my ID to prove I lived there and insisted I had never seen the man before. I also asked them to search the rest of the house to ensure no one else was hiding. I explained that my wife was visiting my sister in Mexico, over 100 miles away. The police handcuffed the unconscious man, arrested him, and transported him to the hospital's jail ward. I followed them to the station to file a report. I was later informed that when he regained consciousness, he was handcuffed to the hospital bed. Disoriented, he didn't understand what was happening at first. He claimed that he had been invited into my house by my wife and somehow lost consciousness. But the police had already searched the house and confirmed that my wife wasn't there. Then he changed his story. He said that he and my wife had been having an affair for months. According to him, their relationship had been so discreet that no one else knew about it. But because there was no evidence or anyone to corroborate his claim, it sounded like a desperate excuse. He even suggested that I must have drugged him, saying he had only drunk some of my scotch. The police returned to my house to investigate further. They examined the freshly changed bed sheets and took the untouched bottle of scotch for lab analysis. Meanwhile, my sister, who was fully aware of everything that had happened, stood by me. She warned my wife that if she tried to provide an alibi for her lover, she would expose the affair to the world. I demanded that my wife stay in Mexico to avoid being subpoenaed and forced to testify for her lover. I wanted that man to end up in jail. To ensure her cooperation, I promised her a better divorce settlement if she complied. Meanwhile, her lover called his wife, begging her to bail him out of jail. But when she learned why he was there, she refused to help. A few days later, the lab report confirmed that he had the date rape drug in his system, but none was found in the bottle of scotch. The police concluded that he had intentionally taken the drug himself. Some of the drug was even found in his pants pocket on the living room floor. They suspected he might have used it recreationally, as some people do to experience its effects. He was sentenced to 90 days in jail. He also happened to be my wife's dentist, and because of the drugs found on him, he lost his license. Of course, with the fingers on his right hand broken, he wouldn't have been able to practice dentistry anyway. I waited 3 months before filing for divorce. Since we were renting our house, there wasn't any property dispute. I gave her a 60-40 split of our assets as promised, on the condition that she wouldn't testify in her boyfriend's defense. Trying to keep more would have cost me more in legal fees than it was worth. She agreed without a fight. I never told my children or anyone else the real story. As far as everyone knew, my wife had been faithful, and we had simply grown apart. That was 25 years ago. Over the years, I never remarried. I hoped to meet someone new, maybe a beautiful woman who'd fall in love with me, but it never happened. At one point, I even joined a gym to try and get back in shape, but it didn't work. Not in the 3 months I tried it, at least. Of course, I miss my wife, but I could never reconcile with her because I could never trust her again. When her dentist lover got out of jail, they reconnected. After both of their divorces, they married each other. Her new husband started working at her father's liquor store, which was a far cry from his previous life as a successful dentist. At my oldest grandson's first birthday party, her husband had too much to drink and accused me of drugging him and ruining his life. Laughing, I taunted, "You were just saying that to make me feel good." Years later, after their 20th wedding anniversary, my children told me that their mother was happy with her new husband. Though I've spent all these years alone, I'm glad she found peace in her own way. I don't regret divorcing her. I couldn't live with a cheater. If I can't trust a woman, I can't love her. A few times a year, I travel to Nevada, where adult entertainment is legal, to spend time with an escort named Cindy. Sometimes, we're not even intimate. I just take her out for dinner because I miss female companionship. Cindy knows my life story, and one day, she came up with an idea that I truly loved. What keeps me sane, though, is the fact that my 3 children live just a few minutes away. I babysit my grandchildren a few days a week, and they bring me more joy than I can describe. Scientists may say there's no such thing as a perpetual motion machine, but they've never met my 2-year-old grandson, John, or his 3-year-old cousin, Lucy. After they run me ragged for a few hours, their parents pick them up, and I'm left exhausted in the best way possible. Most nights, I'm so tired I fall asleep on the couch because I don't have the energy to make it upstairs to my bedroom. My wife's cheating took away the life I once dreamed of, but my grandchildren have given me more than enough compensation. It seems the saying, "Once a cheater, always a cheater," turned out to be true. When her new husband turned 63, my ex-wife caught him cheating with a 30-year-old woman on his birthday. My ex-wife's new husband eventually met my special friend, Cindy, when she walked into the liquor store where he worked. As a favor to me, Cindy seduced him. The plan worked perfectly. I arranged for my ex-wife to receive a text message directing her to a motel room where she found her husband with another woman. Pulling off this act of revenge cost me more than a few dollars, but it was worth it. The satisfaction I felt was priceless. As they say, revenge is a dish best served cold. By this point, so much time had passed since our divorce that no one suspected I had anything to do with it. It was my private victory, and I enjoyed every moment of it. The following week, my ex-wife and I were both at our daughter's house. She was crying and criticizing me, claiming I wasn't empathetic to her pain. Through her tears, she said, "You could never understand how much it hurts to have someone you love betray you." That's when I realized just how oblivious she was. In the end, Judy decided she didn't need her new husband anymore. She stopped supporting him, and by the time he turned 64, she divorced him.